What happens when your own family forges your signature on a six-figure loan and then looks you dead in the eye and says it's your duty as family? Most people would explode, scream, maybe even throw things. But sometimes the most devastating response is the quietest one. This is the story of how a fourth-grade teacher named Elena used silence as her weapon and taught her family a lesson they'll never forget. What she did next shocked everyone who knew her, including herself. And if you've ever been the family member everyone takes for granted, you'll understand exactly why she never looked back. The phone rang at exactly 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning in October. I remember because I was writing the time on the whiteboard for my fourth graders when my cell phone buzzed across my desk. Lincoln Elementary had a strict no phones policy during class, but something about the way it vibrated seemed urgent. "Miss Martinez, can you answer it?" asked Sophie, one of my more precocious students. "What if it's an emergency?" I glanced at the unknown number and almost declined it. But Sophie was right. What if it was an emergency? "Hello, is this Elena Rosa Martinez?" The voice was crisp, professional, with the kind of tone that meant business. "Yes, this is Elena. This is Jennifer Walsh from First National Credit Union. I'm calling regarding your outstanding home equity loan with a current balance of $287,000. We've sent multiple notices to your registered address, but we haven't received any response." The classroom around me seemed to fade. 20 to 8-year-olds working on their morning math problems, autumn sunlight streaming through windows decorated with paper pumpkins, the familiar smell of markers and hand sanitizer, it all became background noise to the roaring in my ears. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's been a mistake. I don't have a home equity loan." A pause. The sound of computer keys clicking. "Ma'am, our records show Elena Rosa Martinez, date of birth March 15, 1995, social security number ending in 4782. The loan was initiated 18 months ago for property improvement and business expansion purposes. My birthday, my social security number, my full name, including the middle name I rarely used except on official documents. There has to be some mistake," I repeated, but even as I said it, something cold and heavy was settling in my stomach. 18 months ago, that timing wasn't random. "I'll need to call you back," I said quickly and hung up. For the next 3 hours, I moved through my teaching routine like I was underwater. We practiced multiplication tables. We read about the life cycle of butterflies. I helped Marcus. No, wait. That was my brother's name. I helped Tommy with his spelling words. But part of my mind was spinning back 18 months, trying to remember what had been happening in my family then. That's when it hit me. 18 months ago, my brother, Marcus, had been talking nonstop about expanding his auto repair shop. He'd been drawing plans on napkins, measuring the empty lot next to his current garage, talking about hiring more mechanics. He'd been so excited, so full of dreams about building something bigger, something lasting. He'd also been complaining about his credit score. "It's not fair," he'd said at Sunday dinner, pushing his food around his plate. "One mistake with that credit card when I was 22, and now no bank will touch me. I've got the skills, I've got the plan, I just need the capital." Mom had patted his hand. "Don't worry, Mijo. Family finds a way. We always do." Dad had nodded. "Your sister's got good credit, steady job, never missed a payment. Maybe she can help somehow." At the time, I'd thought they meant I might co-sign something small, maybe a few $1,000s to get him started. I'd even mentally prepared myself to say yes, because that's what I did. I was the steady one, the reliable one, the daughter who never caused problems. I never imagined they meant $500,000. I never imagined they meant forging my signature. That afternoon, after my students had gone home and the hallways of Lincoln Elementary had emptied out, I sat in my classroom surrounded by construction paper turkeys and spelling tests, calling First National Credit Union back. "I need copies of all the loan documents," I told Jennifer Walsh. "Everything. The application, the signatures, the property information, all of it, of course, Miss Martinez. We can email them to you within the hour." "Is there a particular reason you need them?" I looked out my classroom window at the playground where my students had been laughing just an hour earlier. Everything had seemed so normal then, so safe. "Because I never signed anything," I said quietly. "And I need to prove it." The documents arrived in my inbox at 4:23 p.m. I printed them out on the school's copier, my hands shaking slightly as Paige Afterpage emerged. Property assessment for 1247 Industrial Drive. That was the lot next to Marcus's shop. Loan application filled out in neat handwriting that wasn't mine. Employment verification for Elena Martinez, teacher at Lincoln Elementary. Information that was accurate but that I'd never provided. And there, on page 12, was my signature, except it wasn't. I'd been signing my name the same way since high school. Elena with a loop on the E that curved back under the first three letters. Rosa with a sharp R that never quite connected to the O. Martinez with a flourish on the Z that I'd practiced in middle school because I thought it looked sophisticated. This signature was close, really close, but the E was too straight, the R too rounded, the Z too careful. Someone had practiced my signature, studied it, traced it maybe, but they couldn't replicate the unconscious muscle memory of 28 years. I knew exactly who it was. Growing up, Marcus had always been the dreamer and I'd been the realist. He was 3 years older, but somehow I'd always felt like the responsible older sister. When he'd crashed his motorcycle at 17, I'd been the one to call the insurance company and handle the paperwork while he recovered. When he'd dropped out of college to pursue his business ideas, I'd been the one to help him write his business plans and organize his finances. Elena's got a good head for numbers, Dad would say proudly. Marcus has the vision, but Elena makes sure things get done right. It had felt good to be needed, to be the competent one. But now I realized that what I'd thought was respect might have been something else entirely. They hadn't seen me as capable, they'd seen me as convenient. That evening, I spread every document I could find across my kitchen table. Tax returns where I'd listed my parents as dependents for a few years when Dad was unemployed. Insurance forms I'd signed when Mom had her surgery. Bank statements I'd shared when we'd all been looking into refinancing the family house together. So many signatures. So many examples of my handwriting, my personal information, my financial history. All of it handed over willingly because they were family, because I trusted them, because I never imagined they'd use it against me. The more I looked, the angrier I got. But it wasn't the hot, explosive anger I'd expected. It was something colder, more focused. It was the anger of someone who'd finally understood how little their trust had been worth. I called in sick the next day, the first sick day I'd taken in 3 years, and drove to the law office of Sarah Chen, the attorney my teachers union recommended for financial disputes. Sarah was younger than I'd expected, probably close to my age, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that meant business. Her office was small but organized, law books lined up perfectly on shelves that smelled like leather and determination. "Tell me everything," she said, settling behind her desk with a legal pad. So I did. I told her about growing up as the responsible daughter, about Marcus's dreams and failed businesses, about my parents' expectations that I'd always be there to help. I showed her the loan documents, my real signature samples, the timeline that proved I'd been out of state at a teachers' conference the day the loan was supposedly signed in person. Sarah listened without interrupting, making notes in neat handwriting that reminded me of my own. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me carefully. "Elena," she said slowly, "this isn't just identity theft. This is systematic fraud involving multiple family members. Your brother forged your signature, but your parents had to provide supporting documentation. They all participated in this." The word fraud hung in the air between us like something toxic. I'd been thinking of it as a betrayal, a violation of trust, but hearing it in legal terms made it real in a way that scared me. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends on what you want to happen. We can dispute the loan, clear your credit, make sure you're not financially responsible. That's the minimum. But if you want to pursue criminal charges," she let the sentence hang. We both knew what that meant. Police reports, investigations, possibly arrests. My brother, my parents, all of them facing real consequences for what they'd done. "I don't want to destroy my family," I said quietly. "Elena," Sarah said gently, "you're not destroying anything. They did this to themselves when they decided to commit fraud using your identity. You're just deciding whether to hold them accountable for it." I thought about that word, accountable. For 30 years, I'd been the one who was accountable. Accountable for good grades, for perfect attendance, for never causing problems. Accountable for helping everyone else succeed while my own needs went unnoticed. Maybe it was time for someone else to be accountable for once. "What do I need to do?" I asked. The process was more involved than I'd expected. First, A police report filed at the downtown station with Detective Rodriguez, a woman with kind eyes and a patient voice who'd clearly handled family disputes before. You understand this could result in criminal charges against your family members? She asked as I signed my statement. I understand, I said, and I meant it. Next came the formal dispute letter to First National Credit Union, complete with police report number, notarized affidavit, and copies of my real signature from official documents. Sarah helped me craft language that was professional but firm. I had never authorized this loan, never signed these documents, never received any benefit from the borrowed money. The hardest part was the waiting. For 3 days after filing the police report, my phone stayed silent. No calls from my family, no texts asking about Sunday dinner, no random messages from mom about sales at Target or funny videos she'd found online. The silence felt strange. For 28 years, I'd been woven into the fabric of their daily lives. I was the one who remembered birthdays, who brought dessert to family gatherings, who called to check in when someone was sick. Now suddenly, nothing. I wondered if they even knew what I'd done. I found out on Saturday morning. I was in my tiny garden behind my apartment, just a few raised beds where I grew herbs and vegetables for my classroom science projects when I heard car doors slamming in the parking lot. Multiple doors, multiple voices, the sound of people moving with purpose. I looked up to see all 3 of them walking toward me, Mom, Dad, and Marcus. Mom was carrying her signature peace offering, a glass dish that probably contained her famous enchilada casserole. Dad's face was set in the expression he'd worn when I was a kid and had broken something expensive. Marcus looked younger somehow, like he'd shrunk inside his clothes. Elena, sweetheart, Mom started, her voice bright with forced cheerfulness. We brought lunch. I made your favorite. I stayed kneeling in my garden, my hands steady on a tomato plant that needed transplanting. The soil was warm and real under my fingers, grounding me in a way that felt important. Hello, I said simply. Elena, Marcus said, stepping forward. Slightly. We need to talk. There's been some kind of misunderstanding, has there? I asked, not looking up from my plant. Dad cleared his throat, the sound he made when he was preparing to deliver a lecture. Elena, we know you're upset, but going to the police? That's not how family handles problems. We work things out together, in private. I carefully lifted the tomato plant from its small pot, examining the roots that had grown tangled and cramped in the confined space. It needed more room to grow, fresh soil, space to spread out, like you work things out when you forged my signature? I asked conversationally. The silence that followed was different from the comfortable quiet of my garden. This was the silence of people who'd been caught, who were scrambling to find the right words to make everything okay again. Elena, Mom said, crouching down beside me. Honey, it wasn't like that. Marcus needed help, and you have such good credit. We knew if we asked, you'd want to help. We were just cutting through the paperwork. Cutting through the paperwork, I repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling forgery now? Marcus knelt on my other side, his voice pleading. Elena, I was desperate. The business was failing. I had creditors calling. I could have lost everything. You weren't using your credit for anything important, I said, finally looking up at him. My financial future wasn't important? That's not what I meant, he said quickly. I meant you're not buying a house or starting a business or anything. Your credit was just sitting there. So you stole it. I borrowed it, he corrected. I was always going to pay it back. The business is doing great now, Elena. Really? Great. I can start making payments to clear your name. My name, I said, turning back to my plants, was never yours to clear. Dad stepped closer, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used when we were children and he needed us to fall in line. Elena, enough of this drama. Marcus made a mistake, but family doesn't abandon family over money. We stick together. We forgive. That's what love means. I looked up at this man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with algebra homework, who'd walked me to my first day of kindergarten, who now thought that love meant the right to commit crimes using my identity. Dad, I said quietly, if Marcus had asked me 18 months ago to co-sign a loan, what would I have said? He shifted uncomfortably. Well, that would have been a big decision. I would have said no, I said simply. I would have said no because I'm a teacher making $42,000 a year, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, driving a 10-year-old car. I would have said no because taking on nearly $300,000 in debt would have been financially catastrophic for me, but that's exactly why we didn't ask, Mom said, as if this explained everything. We knew you'd worry. Knew you'd see all the problems instead of the possibilities. Sometimes people who love you have to make hard decisions for you. Hard decisions for me, I repeated. Like destroying my credit. Like putting me at risk for a debt I never agreed to. Like making me legally responsible for a business I don't own and never wanted. I stood up, brushing soil from my knees. All three of them were still crouched around my garden, looking up at me like children who'd been caught doing something they knew was wrong. You didn't make a hard decision for me, I said, my voice calm and clear. You made an easy decision for yourselves. You took the path that required the least effort, the least risk, the least discomfort for everyone except me. Marcus stood up, reaching toward me. Elena, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll refinance in my own name. I'll take over the payments. I'll make this right. You can't make this right, I said, stepping back. You can fix the loan, maybe. You can repair the damage to my credit eventually, but you can't give me back the trust you stole. You can't undo the fact that when you needed help, your first instinct wasn't to ask your sister, it was to use her. We thought you'd understand, Mom said, tears starting to form in her eyes. We thought you'd see that we were all in this together, that Marcus's success was the family's success. If we were all in this together, I said, then we all would have made the decision together. But you didn't want a partner, Mom. You wanted a victim who wouldn't fight back. The word victim seemed to hit them like a physical blow. Dad's face flushed red. Mom's tears started falling in earnest, and Marcus took another step forward. Elena, that's not fair, isn't it? I asked. Tell me, Marcus, in all your planning for this business expansion, did you ever once consider how it might affect me if something went wrong? Did you think about what would happen to my credit? My financial future, my ability to buy a house, or get a loan if your business failed? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. You didn't think about me at all, I continued. I wasn't a person to you. I was a resource, a credit score and a social security number that you could use when you needed them. That's not true, Mom protested. You're our daughter, your backup plan, I finished. That's what I've always been. Isn't it? The responsible one who'll clean up everyone else's messes. The steady one who'll always say yes when the family needs something. The quiet one who won't make waves even when she's drowning. I looked at each of them in turn, these people who'd raised me, shaped me, loved me in their own complicated way. But I'm done being quiet, I said. And I'm done saying yes to things I was never asked about. I walked toward my apartment door, then turned back. They were all still standing in my garden, looking lost and smaller than I'd ever seen them. I love you, I said, and I meant it. But I don't trust you anymore, and I can't have a relationship with people I don't trust. Dad found his voice first. Elena, you're being dramatic. This is family. We work through problems, we don't run away from them. I'm not running away, I said. I'm walking away. There's a difference. I went inside and closed the door. Not a slam, not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Through my kitchen window, I watched them stand there for almost 15 minutes, talking, gesturing, probably planning what to say next. But I'd already said everything I needed to say. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. They can only be remembered. The weeks that followed were strange and quiet and surprisingly peaceful. No Sunday dinner invitations. No random phone calls about family gossip. No guilt-laden texts about missed birthdays or holidays. The silence I'd feared turned out to be exactly what I needed. I filled my time with things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. Saturday morning farmers markets where I bought ingredients for elaborate meals I cooked just for myself. Pottery classes at the community center where my hands learned to shape clay into something beautiful and useful. Long walks in the state park where I could think clearly for the first time in years. My credit report slowly began to improve as First National Credit Union investigated the fraud and eventually removed the loan from my record. Sarah kept me updated on the legal proceedings. Marcus would face charges, but probably nothing more than fines and community service for a first offense. The business would have to be refinanced legally, which meant higher interest rates and smaller loan amounts. Dad and Mom weren't facing criminal charges, but the whole family was dealing with the financial consequences of cleaning up the mess. They were learning to solve problems without using me as their solution. A T school I threw myself into teaching with renewed energy. There's something clarifying about setting boundaries in one part of your life. It makes you better at everything else. My students seemed to sense the change, responding to my increased confidence with better behavior and more engagement. One afternoon in late November, as autumn was giving way to winter, a new student joined our class. His name was Timothy, and he was 8 years old with serious eyes and the careful posture of a child who'd learned not to take up too much space. Timothy's file told a complicated story: 3 different foster homes in 2 years, parents who loved him but couldn't take care of him, a grandmother who wanted to help but had limited resources. He was polite and quiet and heartbreakingly careful not to be any trouble. One day, as the other kids rushed out for recess, Timothy lingered at his desk, methodically organizing his crayons by color. "Miss Martinez," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Timothy." He looked up at me with those serious 8-year-old eyes. "Is it okay to love someone but not want to live with them?" The question hit me like a gentle punch to the chest. This little boy, who'd been shuffled between adults who probably loved him but couldn't properly care for him, understood something that had taken me 28 years to learn. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "loving someone means protecting yourself from them. That doesn't make you a bad person, Timothy. That makes you wise." He nodded like this made perfect sense, then ran outside to join his friends on the playground. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and thought about wisdom. About the difference between being strong and being used. About how sometimes the people who love you can hurt you the most, not out of malice, but out of thoughtlessness. About how sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Winter came early that year, and with it, a strange kind of peace. I decorated my apartment for Christmas just for me, with ornaments I actually liked instead of the family heirlooms I'd always displayed out of obligation. I cooked elaborate meals and invited my teacher friends over for dinner parties that lasted until midnight. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years, took online classes in photography, started planning a summer trip to Italy that I'd been dreaming about since college. For the first time in my adult life, my time was entirely my own. My money was my own. My decisions were my own. I wasn't lonely. I was free. In January, I got a card in the mail with no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Elena, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did wrong. It wasn't just about the money or the loan. It was about taking your choice away. It was about treating you like a thing I could use instead of a person I should respect. I'm sorry. Really sorry. The business is doing okay. Not great, but okay. We had to refinance everything the right way, and it's been hard, but we're making it work. Mom and Dad are helping more than they used to. Maybe we should have figured that out 18 months ago instead of what we did. I hope you're happy. I hope you're doing things that make you proud of yourself. I know you probably won't write back, but I wanted you to know that I think about what you said a lot. About being a partner instead of using someone. I'm trying to be better at that. Your brother." Marcusi read the letter twice, then put it in the box where I keep important documents. Not because I planned to respond, I didn't, but because some truths are worth preserving, even painful ones, especially painful ones. I never wrote back, but I kept the letter. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered, not as failures, but as reminders of what real love looks like. Real love asks permission. Real love considers consequences. Real love doesn't steal your name and call it family duty. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought with it a sense of renewal that felt earned rather than expected. I planted a bigger garden, signed up for a graduate course in education, started dating a fellow teacher who made me laugh and never once asked me to do anything I wasn't comfortable with. On a warm Saturday in May, almost a year after that first phone call, I was at the farmer's market buying flowers for my kitchen table when I saw them, Mom, Dad, and Marcus, standing near the vegetable stands, talking quietly among themselves. They looked older somehow, more tired, but also more connected to each other, like people who'd been through something difficult together and come out stronger on the other side. Marcus was the first to notice me. Our eyes met across the crowd of Saturday morning shoppers, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement that said everything and nothing. I nodded back and turned away, not out of anger, but out of acceptance. We were different people now, living different lives, connected by history but not by choice, and that was okay. That afternoon, I sat in my garden surrounded by tomato plants and herbs, grading papers in the spring sunshine. Timothy had written a story about a boy who learned that sometimes the people who love you have to let you go, and that sometimes letting go is the most loving thing you can do. 8 years old, and he already understood what it had taken me nearly 3 decades to learn. I gave him an A+ and added a note: Timothy, this is beautiful and wise. Sometimes the hardest lessons make us the strongest people. I'm proud of you for understanding that. Later that evening, as I prepared for another week of teaching, another week of living life on my own terms, I thought about the phone call that had changed everything. About how sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest freedoms. They used my name like it belonged to them, signed my future away without asking. But in the end, I was the one who got to decide what my name meant, and I chose freedom. I chose boundaries. I chose the quiet strength that comes from walking away when walking away is the right thing to do. If you've ever been the family member everyone depends on but no one asks, you understand why I never went back. Sometimes the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to be used. Real family doesn't steal your future and call it love. Real family doesn't use your trust as a tool. And real family doesn't make you choose between your financial security and their approval. I chose myself. And for the first time in my life, that choice felt like coming home. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. Some stories end with recognition, the recognition that you deserve better than what you've been accepting, that you're worth more than what people have been offering, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach people that there are consequences for treating love like a license to take advantage. I taught my family the most important lesson of my life, that Elena Martinez is not a resource to be used, but a person to be respected. And if they couldn't learn that lesson, then they couldn't have me. In the end, that was the only choice that mattered.